I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, when I heard my husband talking on the phone in his office. The door was slightly cracked, and his voice carried down the hallway with a tone I had never heard before. It was cruel and calculating, nothing like the man I thought I had married 3 years ago. "She's such a burden, Rachel, always asking questions about money, always worried about everything. But don't worry, baby. Once she signs those papers, the house will be ours. All we have to do is make her think it's for tax purposes or something." My heart stopped. Rachel, I knew that name. She worked with him at the marketing firm downtown. The same Rachel who had been texting him late at night. The same Rachel he claimed was just a friend when I asked about their frequent coffee meetings. "Emma's so naive," he continued, and I could hear him laughing. "She actually thinks I love her, but you know what I love? That house. $980,000 worth of prime real estate that her dead grandmother left her. Once it's in both our names, we can sell it and start fresh somewhere new, just you and me." I felt like the floor was falling out from under me. This was my grandmother's house, the house where I had spent every summer as a child. The house where Grandma Rose had taught me to bake cookies and told me stories about our family. The house she had left specifically to me in her will because she knew how much it meant to me. "The best part is," he went on, "Emma pays for everything. The mortgage, insurance, the utilities, the repairs. She even paid for our vacation next week. She's like having a personal bank account that never asks questions." I backed away from the hallway, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the coffee cup. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of thinking I had found my soulmate. 3 years of believing him when he said he was struggling financially because he was starting his own business. 3 years of paying for everything while he saved his money for vacations with another woman. "I can't wait to get away with you, Rachel. 2 weeks in Europe, and Emma has no idea she's paying for me to cheat on her. She's so pathetic, always trying to please everyone, always apologizing for everything. Sometimes I can't stand to look at her." Those words hit me like a physical blow. All those times he had seemed distant. All those times he had made me feel like I was asking for too much when I wanted to spend time together. All those times he had made me feel guilty for wanting affection or attention. It had all been an act. "She keeps talking about having kids," he said, and I could hear the disgust in his voice. "Can you imagine, bringing children into this mess? She can barely take care of herself. She's 29 and still acts like a teenager, always needing reassurance, always needing someone to tell her what to do." I realized I was crying, tears streaming down my face as I listened to this man destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. This was the same man who had held me when my grandmother died. The same man who had promised to love and cherish me. The same man who had moved into my grandmother's house and made it feel like our home. "Once we get the house in both our names, we can refinance it and take out a big loan. Then we'll sell it and disappear. Emma will be left with nothing, and she'll probably blame herself for it. She always does." I heard him moving around in his office, and I quickly went back to the kitchen trying to compose myself. My mind was racing. How long had this been going on? How long had I been living with a stranger who saw me as nothing more than a source of money and free housing? When he came into the kitchen 5 minutes later, he was all smiles. "Hey, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek like nothing had happened. "I was just talking to a client about a new project. Looks like business is finally picking up." I stared at him, this man I thought I knew, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. "That's great," I managed to say. "I'm happy for you." "You know what would make me even happier," he said, pulling me close. "If we could get that paperwork sorted out before our trip. You know, the stuff about adding my name to the house deed. My accountant says it would be good for tax purposes, especially if we're thinking about starting a family." There it was, the trap he had been setting for months. All those conversations about our future, about making sure we were financially secure, about making sure everything was legal and proper in case something happened to me. He had been grooming me to sign away my inheritance. "I'm not sure about that," I said carefully. "Maybe we should wait until after the vacation. I want to think about it more." His smile faltered for just a second, but then he was back to being charming. "Of course, baby, no pressure." I just want to make sure you're protected. You know how much I love you, right? I nodded, but inside I was screaming. Everything he had said to me, every kiss, every moment of intimacy had been a lie. I was nothing more than a mark to him, a burden he was willing to tolerate as long as I kept paying the bills and signing the papers he put in front of me. That night, I lay in bed next to him, listening to him breathe, and I knew my life had changed forever. I couldn't go back to being the naive woman who trusted him completely. I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard what I had heard, but I also couldn't let him know that I knew. Not yet. As I stared at the ceiling, I began to plan. If he thought I was a burden, if he thought I was naive and pathetic, then I would use that against him. I would let him think he was winning while I figured out how to protect myself and everything my grandmother had left me. The man sleeping next to me had no idea that the burden he was planning to destroy was about to become his worst nightmare. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice saying those terrible things. Every time I looked at him sleeping peacefully beside me, I wanted to scream. But I couldn't, not yet. I had to be smart about this. The next morning, he was back to his usual routine. Coffee, newspaper, checking his phone with that secret smile I now understood. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, just like he had every morning for 3 years. But now I could hear the lie in it. "Morning," I replied, pouring my own coffee with hands that were steadier than I expected. "What time is your flight on Friday?" 2 o'clock, he said without looking up from his phone, probably texting Rachel. "Are you sure you'll be okay here alone for 2 weeks? I know you get nervous when I'm gone." Another lie. I had never told him I got nervous when he was alone. In fact, I usually enjoyed having the house to myself. But he had convinced me over the years that I was anxious and dependent, that I needed him to feel secure. Now I realized it was all part of his plan to make me feel helpless. "I'll be fine," I said. "Actually, I might use the time to organize some of Grandma's old papers. I've been putting it off for too long." He looked up sharply. "What kind of papers?" "Just old documents, photos, that sort of thing." "Nothing important." I kept my voice casual, but I was watching his face. I saw the flash of worry before he covered it with a smile. "Well, don't throw anything away without checking with me first. You never know what might be valuable." Valuable to whom? I thought. But I just nodded and finished my breakfast. After he left for work, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, trying to process everything that had happened. 3 years of my life had been built on lies. 3 years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I needed to try harder, like I was lucky he had chosen me. Now I understood why I had felt that way. He had been systematically destroying my confidence while stealing my money and planning to steal my home. I thought about all the times he had forgotten his wallet when we went out to dinner. All the times he had asked me to pay for things because his account was temporarily frozen or his business expenses were tied up. All the times he had convinced me that supporting him financially was what a good wife did. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. I needed to understand my legal rights. I needed to know exactly what he could and couldn't do. Most importantly, I needed to know how to protect the house that my grandmother had left me. What I found made me sick. He had been right about one thing: if I signed those papers adding his name to the deed, he would have legal claim to half the house in a divorce. Even worse, if something happened to me, he would inherit everything. All those conversations about making sure I was protected had actually been about making sure he could take everything if I died. I spent hours reading about property law, about financial abuse, about marriage and divorce. I learned terms I had never heard before, like economic coercion and financial manipulation. I read stories from other women who had been in similar situations, women who had lost everything because they trusted the wrong person. But I also read stories about women who had fought back, women who had been smart and strategic, women who had turned the tables on the men who tried to destroy them. By the time he came home that evening, I had a plan. It wasn't complete yet, but I knew what I needed to do. I needed to act normal until he left for his vacation. I needed to use those 2 weeks to protect myself and my assets. And I needed to do it all without him suspecting anything. "How was your day?" he asked, kissing my cheek again. I wondered if he kissed Rachel the same way. "Good," I said. I called about getting those papers notarized. The lawyer says we should wait until after the new year for tax reasons. It was a complete lie, but he seemed to buy it. That makes sense, no rush. How's your business trip shaping up? I asked, even though I knew it wasn't a business trip at all. Great, Rachel and I have some big meetings lined up. This could really turn things around for the company. More lies, but I just smiled and nodded like the naive wife he thought I was. Over dinner, I watched him carefully. Really looked at him for the first time in months. He was handsome, I had to give him that. Tall, dark hair, nice smile. But now I could see the coldness in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. I could see how he checked his phone constantly, how he seemed impatient when I talked about my day, how he always steered conversations back to topics that benefited him. I was thinking, I said carefully, maybe when you get back from your trip, we should think about refinancing the house. Interest rates are still pretty good. His eyes lit up. That's a great idea, we could probably get a lot of cash out of it. Maybe enough to finally take that honeymoon we never had. A honeymoon he would take with Rachel, no doubt. Exactly, I said. I'll start getting the paperwork together while you're gone. That night, I pretended to be asleep when he got a text message at midnight. I heard him get up quietly and go to the bathroom to respond. When he came back to bed, he was smiling in the dark. I waited until I was sure he was asleep, then I got up and went to his office. I knew his computer password. It was Rachel's birthday, something I had figured out months ago but had tried not to think about. What I found in his email confirmed everything I had suspected and worse. Months of emails between him and Rachel, planning their relationship, planning their future, planning how to get me to sign over the house. There were emails to real estate agents asking about property values. There were emails to lawyers asking about divorce settlements. There were even emails about apartments they were looking at together. But the worst were the emails where they laughed about me. Where he called me names and made fun of the way I tried to please him. Where she made jokes about how pathetic I was for paying for everything while he cheated on me. I printed everything. Every email, every document, every piece of evidence I could find. I was careful to clear the printer history and make sure everything looked exactly the way I had found it. By 3 in the morning, I had a stack of papers that told the whole story of my husband's betrayal. But more importantly, I had proof. Proof that would protect me when this all came crashing down. I went back to bed and lay there until dawn, planning my next move. I had 3 days before he left for his business trip. 3 days to set everything in motion. 3 days to become someone he had never expected me to be. The burden was about to become his biggest problem. The next 3 days were the hardest acting job of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal while secretly planning to dismantle the life we had built together. Every smile I gave him, every conversation we had, every moment I spent helping him pack for his trip with Rachel felt like swallowing glass. Tuesday morning, after he left for work, I made my first real move. I called a lawyer named Patricia Wells, whose name I had found online. She specialized in family law and financial abuse cases. Her website said she offered free consultations for women in crisis situations. Mrs. Davis, she said when I explained my situation, I'm glad you called before you signed anything. What your husband is attempting is a form of financial abuse, and you have more rights than you realize. We talked for an hour. She explained that since the house was my inheritance and my name was the only one on the deed, he had no legal claim to it regardless of our marriage. She also explained that all the money I had spent supporting him over the years could be considered marital assets that I might be able to recover in a divorce. The key is documentation, she said. Bank records, credit card statements, emails, text messages, anything that shows a pattern of financial manipulation. I had already started gathering those things, but her words gave me confidence that I was on the right track. We scheduled a meeting for the following week, after he would be gone. Next, I called a real estate agent. I told her I was thinking about selling the house due to a family situation and needed to understand my options. She was excited about the listing. Properties in my neighborhood were selling quickly, often for more than asking price. With the market the way it is now, she said, you could probably have this sold within 2 weeks if you price it right. Are you thinking about a quick sale? Maybe, I said, I'll let you know soon. Wednesday, I went to the bank. I told them I wanted to open a new checking account for business purposes. I moved half of our joint savings into this new account, money that was legally mine since I had earned most of it. I also applied for a safety deposit box where I could keep important documents. That evening, my husband was excited about his upcoming trip. I can't wait to get away for a while, he said. This business thing has been so stressful. I'm sure you and Rachel will work everything out, I said, watching his face carefully. He didn't even flinch. Yeah, she's great to work with. Very professional. I wondered if professional was what he called cheating with a married man. Thursday was my last day to prepare before he left. I spent it making copies of everything: bank statements, credit card bills, insurance documents, the deed to the house, our marriage certificate, tax returns. I put one set in the safety deposit box and kept another set hidden in my bedroom closet. I also did something that felt symbolic. I went to Grandma Rose's jewelry box and took out the necklace she had given me for my 16th birthday. It was a simple gold chain with a small diamond pendant, nothing fancy, but it had been hers when she was young. I hadn't worn it since the wedding because my husband had said it looked old-fashioned. I put it on and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time in months, I looked like myself again. Not the anxious, apologetic woman I had become, but the confident young woman my grandmother had raised. That night, I helped him finish packing. He was bringing 2 suitcases for a business trip, which should have been my first clue years ago that something was wrong. What kind of business trip required vacation clothes and expensive cologne? I'm going to miss you, he said, holding me close. I could smell his aftershave, the same scent I had once loved and now made me feel sick. I'll miss you too, I lied. Promise me you won't do anything crazy while I'm gone. No major decisions, no big purchases. Just relax and take care of yourself. He had no idea how well I was about to take care of myself. Friday morning, I drove him to the airport. He kissed me goodbye at the curb, a long, dramatic kiss that felt like a performance. I love you, he said. I love you too, I replied, and for a moment I almost meant it. Not because I loved who he was, but because I grieved for who I thought he had been. I watched him walk into the terminal, probably texting Rachel to let her know he was there. Then I drove home to the house that was about to become the center of a war I was finally ready to fight. As soon as I got home, I called Patricia Wells. He's gone, I said. I'm ready to move forward. Good, she said. Let's meet tomorrow morning. Bring everything you've gathered, and Mrs. Davis. Don't feel guilty about what you're about to do. You're not destroying your marriage. You're saving yourself from someone who was planning to destroy you. That afternoon, I called the real estate agent back. I want to list the house, I said. How quickly can we do this? I can have the paperwork ready by Monday, she said. Are you sure about this? It's a big decision. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Saturday morning, I woke up alone in the house for the first time in years. Instead of feeling lonely or anxious like he had trained me to expect, I felt free. I made coffee and sat in the kitchen planning my next moves. I had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to sell the house, file for divorce, and disappear from the life he thought he controlled. 2 weeks to show him that the burden he thought was so pathetic was actually smart enough to outmaneuver him. By the time he got back from his romantic vacation with Rachel, paid for with my money, he would find out just how wrong he had been about me. The real Emma Davis was about to stand up. Monday morning felt like the first day of my real life. I met with Patricia Wells at her office, and she reviewed all the evidence I had gathered. Her face grew more serious as she went through the emails, the bank records, and the documented pattern of financial abuse. This is actually better than I expected, she said. You have clear evidence of fraud and financial manipulation. The emails alone show premeditation. Your husband and his girlfriend were planning to steal your inheritance. She explained the legal process for filing for divorce and how to protect my assets during the proceedings. More importantly, she assured me that since the house was my inheritance and my name was the only one on the deed, I had every right to sell it without his permission. The house is yours, she said firmly. He has no legal claim to it, and he has no right to prevent you from selling it. In fact, given what he was planning to do, selling it might be the smartest thing you can do. After the meeting with Patricia, I went straight to the real estate agent's office. Sarah Martinez was a dynamo of a woman in her 50s who had been selling houses in the area for 20 years. She took one look at the photos of my house and smiled. "This is going to sell fast," she said. "Properties like this in your neighborhood are gold right now. I've got 3 clients who would probably be interested before we even listed officially." We spent 2 hours going through the paperwork. Sarah explained that we could do a quick closing, sometimes as fast as 2 weeks if the buyer was paying cash or had pre-approved financing. The asking price she suggested was even higher than I had hoped. $1,050,000. "The market is crazy right now," she explained. "Your grandmother's house is in perfect condition and the location is prime, plus you've maintained it beautifully. I think we can get asking price, maybe even more if we get multiple offers." By Tuesday afternoon, the house was officially listed. Sarah had arranged for professional photos and a virtual tour. Looking at the listing online felt surreal. This house that had been my safe haven, my connection to my grandmother, was about to become someone else's home, but it was the right choice. I couldn't live there anymore, knowing what my husband had planned. Every room held memories of the lies he had told me, the manipulation he had used. Better to sell it and start fresh than to let him eventually steal it from me. Wednesday morning, I got the call I had been hoping for. "Emma, we have an offer," Sarah said. "Actually, we have 3 offers." The highest offer was for $1,100,000, $50,000 over asking price. A young couple with twin babies who had been looking for months for the perfect family home. They could close in 10 days. "Take it," I said without hesitation. While the house sale was moving forward, I was busy with other preparations. I found a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment across town, in a building with good security and a doorman. It was smaller than what I was used to, but it felt safe and private. I could start over there without any memories of the life I was leaving behind. I also opened a new bank account at a different bank, one where he had no access and no history. I transferred the money from the joint account I had emptied earlier, plus I arranged for the proceeds from the house sale to go directly into this new account. Patricia helped me file all the divorce paperwork. We requested an emergency hearing to protect my assets, citing the evidence of financial fraud and his plan to steal my inheritance. The judge granted a temporary restraining order preventing him from accessing any of my accounts or making claims on the house. "When he gets back from his trip, he's going to find himself locked out of everything," Patricia explained. "He won't be able to touch your money, your house, or any of your assets. And if he tries to fight this, we have enough evidence of financial abuse to destroy him in court." Thursday and Friday were a blur of activity. Professional movers came to pack up my personal belongings, my clothes, my books, my grandmother's things, and anything else that mattered to me. I was careful to leave all of his belongings exactly where they were. I wasn't stealing anything from him. I was just taking back what was mine. The hardest part was packing up my grandmother's room. I had left it almost exactly as it was when she died, and my husband had never bothered to ask about it. Now I realized he probably saw it as wasted space, something else he would change once the house was his. I packed her photos, her jewelry, her books, and the quilt she had made when I was born. These things were priceless to me, and I wasn't going to let him throw them away or sell them. Saturday, exactly 1 week after he had left for his business trip, I moved into my new apartment. It was strange being in a completely different space, but it felt clean and free. No memories of lies, no reminders of betrayal. That evening I sat in my new living room and realized I had done it. In 1 week I had sold the house, moved out, filed for divorce, and started a new life. The man who thought I was a helpless burden had no idea what was coming. Sunday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my best friend from college, Lisa, and told her everything. I had been too embarrassed to admit how bad my marriage was, too ashamed to let anyone know how much I had been manipulated. "Emma," she said, "I'm so proud of you. I was so worried about you these past few years. You seemed like you were disappearing, like you weren't yourself anymore." "I wasn't myself," I admitted, "but I'm finding my way back." Monday morning I got the best news of all. The house sale was final. The papers were signed, the money was transferred, and the keys were handed over to the new owners. In less than 2 weeks, I had gone from victim to victor. Now all that was left was waiting for him to come home and discover what the burden had accomplished while he was busy cheating on her with his mistress. I had one more surprise planned for his homecoming, something that would let him know, beyond any doubt, that his plan had failed and his wife had won. The 2 weeks while he was gone were the most productive and liberating of my life. With the house sold and my divorce papers filed, I finally had time to focus on healing and building the foundation for my new life. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Rebecca Torres, who specialized in helping women recover from emotional and financial abuse. My first session was difficult. I broke down crying as I told her about the phone call I had overheard and everything that followed. "What you experienced is called economic abuse," she explained. "It's a form of domestic violence that's often overlooked because there's no physical violence involved, but the psychological damage can be just as severe." Dr. Torres helped me understand that the feelings I had been experiencing, the constant anxiety, the need to apologize for everything, the feeling that I was never good enough, were not character flaws. They were the result of systematic manipulation designed to make me dependent and compliant. "Your husband isolated you emotionally and financially," she said. "He made you doubt your own judgment and your own worth. What you did, recognizing the abuse and taking action to protect yourself, takes incredible strength." For the first time in years, I started to see myself as strong rather than weak. I also used this time to reconnect with parts of myself I had lost during my marriage. I started reading again, real books, not just the romance novels he had dismissed as trash. I began cooking meals I actually enjoyed instead of just making whatever he wanted. I bought clothes that I liked instead of only wearing things he approved of. One afternoon, while organizing my grandmother's things in my new apartment, I found her old journal from the 1960s. Reading her words about her own struggles and triumphs made me feel connected to her in a way I hadn't felt since she died. "A woman must know her own worth," she had written, "and never let anyone convince her she is worth less than she knows herself to be." I wished I could tell her that her granddaughter had finally learned that lesson. The money from the house sale gave me options I had never had before. After setting aside enough for living expenses and legal fees, I still had over $800,000. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly financially independent. I spent hours researching different ways to invest and grow this money. I met with a financial advisor who helped me understand how to protect my assets and plan for the future. It was empowering to make these decisions entirely on my own, without having to consult someone who had been secretly planning to steal from me. But the most important thing I did during those 2 weeks was start planning my next career move. I had been working part-time as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit, a job that barely paid the bills but gave me flexibility to take care of everything at home. Now I realized that my experience with financial abuse, combined with my accounting background, could help other women in similar situations. I researched programs for women's financial literacy and discovered there was a huge need for counselors who could help women understand their financial rights and protect themselves from economic abuse. Several organizations offered training programs for volunteers and eventual paid positions. I enrolled in an online course and began studying financial counseling techniques. For the first time in years, I felt excited about my future instead of anxious about it. As his return date approached, I felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Patricia had assured me that the restraining order would protect me legally, and I had changed all my contact information so he couldn't harass me. But I was curious to see how he would react when he discovered that his carefully laid plans had fallen apart. I had prepared one final surprise for him. On his last day of vacation, I mailed a letter to the house that was no longer mine, but that he didn't know had been sold. The letter was simple and to the point. "Dear ex-husband, I heard your phone conversation with Rachel before you left. I know about your plan to steal my grandmother's house. I know about the affair. I know about all the lies. You called me a burden, you said I was pathetic and naive, you were wrong. While you were on vacation with your girlfriend spending the money I earned, I sold the house you thought you were going to steal. I filed for divorce. I moved out. I started a new life. The burden you thought was so helpless just outplayed you completely. Don't try to contact me. My lawyer will handle everything from now on. P.S. I hope you and Rachel enjoyed the European vacation I paid for. Consider it my divorce gift to you both. Emma. I mailed the letter so it would arrive on the day he returned. I wanted him to find it when he got to the house, expecting to come home to his naive wife who would never suspect what he had been doing. Instead, he would find an empty house and a letter from a woman who had turned his own game against him. The night before his return, I had dinner with Lisa at a nice restaurant near my new apartment. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy. Not the fake happiness I had performed during my marriage, but real joy about my life and my future. You look different, Lisa said. You look like yourself again. I feel like myself again, I told her. Actually, I feel like a better version of myself, stronger and smarter. What are you going to do when he realizes what happened? Nothing, I said. I'm going to let him figure it out on his own, and then I'm going to move forward with my life while he deals with the consequences of his choices. That night I slept peacefully in my new apartment, knowing that tomorrow would bring the end of one chapter of my life and the real beginning of another. The woman who had been called a burden was about to show the world what she was really capable of. I didn't have to wait long to find out how he reacted to coming home. My phone started ringing at 3:47 p.m. on Monday, exactly 12 hours after his flight was scheduled to land. I had blocked his number, but he was calling from different numbers, probably borrowing phones from friends or using Rachel's phone. I didn't answer any of the calls. By evening, he had left 17 voicemails on the old number I had redirected to a Google Voice account. I listened to them all, and they were like a masterclass in manipulation tactics. The first few were confused and pleading. Emma, where are you? What happened to the house? Please call me back. I'm sure this is all some kind of misunderstanding. Then came anger. What the hell did you do? You can't just sell our house without talking to me. This is insane. Call me back right now. Then bargaining. Look, I know you're upset about something, but we can work this out. Whatever you think happened, I can explain. Just come home and let's talk about this like adults. Then threats. You better not have done anything stupid while I was gone. I'm calling a lawyer. You can't just destroy our marriage like this without consequences. And finally, desperation. Emma, please, I love you. I don't understand what's happening, but I know we can fix this. Just talk to me, please. I saved all the voicemails. Patricia had told me to document everything. Tuesday morning, I got a call from Patricia. Your husband retained a lawyer, she said. They're trying to challenge the house sale and claim community property rights. Can they do that? They can try, but they won't succeed. The house was your inheritance, it was never community property, and you had every legal right to sell it. Plus, we have evidence that he was planning to commit fraud. His lawyer is probably going to advise him to accept the divorce terms rather than fight this in court. What happens next? We wait. His lawyer will review the evidence we've provided, and then they'll probably want to negotiate. But Emma, you hold all the cards here. He has no legal standing and no leverage. That afternoon, I did something that felt symbolic. I went back to the old neighborhood, not to see the house, but to visit my grandmother's grave. I hadn't been there since the funeral 3 years ago. My husband had always made excuses about why we were too busy to visit. Standing at her gravestone, I told her everything that had happened. I protected your house, Grandma, I whispered. I didn't let him steal it from us. I could almost hear her voice telling me she was proud of me. Wednesday brought a different kind of contact. Instead of frantic phone calls, I received a formal letter from his lawyer demanding that I return to the marital home and reverse the house sale. The letter was full of legal threats and accusations, claiming I had acted irrationally and in bad faith. Patricia laughed when she read it. This is desperation, she said. They know they have no case, so they're trying to intimidate you. We'll respond with copies of the emails between your husband and his girlfriend. That should shut them up. Thursday, I started my new volunteer work with the Women's Financial Empowerment Center. My first training session was with a group of 10 women who had all experienced some form of economic abuse. Hearing their stories was both heartbreaking and inspiring. The hardest part, said one woman, was realizing that I had let someone convince me I was stupid about money when I actually understood it better than he did. I knew exactly what she meant. Friday morning, I was having coffee in my new apartment when I saw him. He was sitting in a car across the street, just watching my building. I called Patricia immediately. "He's violating the restraining order," she said. "Call the police and document everything." The police arrived within 10 minutes. I watched from my window as they approached his car and spoke to him. He gestured angrily, probably trying to explain that he was just trying to talk to his wife. But the officers weren't interested in his explanations. They gave him a warning and told him to leave. He drove away, but not before looking up at my building one more time. Even from 5 floors up, I could see the rage on his face. That evening, Lisa came over for dinner. "Are you scared?" she asked. "No," I said, and I meant it. "I'm not the same person I was a month ago. He can't hurt me anymore because I don't need anything from him. I don't need his approval, his love, or his money. He has no power over me." What do you think he'll do next? Probably try to turn this into a long, expensive legal battle. But Patricia says he doesn't have a case. Eventually, he'll have to accept that it's over and move on with his life. And Rachel. I smiled. That's the best part. According to the emails I found, she was only interested in him because she thought he was about to come into a lot of money from the house. Now that there's no house and no money, I wonder how long their great love affair will last. Saturday, I got my answer. Rachel called me. "Emma, we need to talk," she said when I answered the unknown number. "No, we really don't," I replied. "Look, I know you're angry, but this whole thing has gotten out of hand. He's talking about fighting you in court for years. This is going to cost everyone a lot of money." "It's going to cost him money," I corrected. "I'm not the one trying to steal something that doesn't belong to me." "He really loves you," she said, which was so ridiculous I almost laughed. "If he loved me, he wouldn't have spent months planning to steal my inheritance while cheating on me with you." That wasn't. It's not that simple. You don't understand the whole situation. I understand perfectly. I have copies of all your emails. I know exactly what you were planning. There was a long silence. Then, "What do you want, money?" "We could work something out." "I don't want anything from either of you. I want you both to leave me alone and let me move on with my life." "But what about him? He doesn't have anywhere to go. He's been living in that house for 3 years. He should have thought about that before he decided to betray his wife." I hung up and blocked her number 2. Sunday night, exactly 2 weeks after he had returned from his vacation, I got one final voicemail. This time his voice was different, defeated. "Emma, I know you probably won't listen to this, but I need to say it. I made mistakes, big mistakes. I got caught up in something that got out of control and I hurt you. I'm not asking you to forgive me and I'm not asking you to take me back. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. You didn't deserve any of this." It was probably the most honest thing he had said to me in years. But it was too little, too late. I deleted the voicemail and went to bed, knowing that the next phase of my new life was about to begin. The legal battle I had expected began in earnest the following week. Despite having no legitimate claim to my inherited property, my soon-to-be ex-husband decided to fight the divorce proceedings and challenge everything he could. His strategy became clear during the first mediation session. Since he couldn't claim the house, he was going after everything else. The joint savings account I had emptied, the credit card debt he had accumulated, even my grandmother's jewelry. His lawyer argued that I had acted vindictively and stolen marital assets. Patricia came prepared. She had organized all of our evidence into a comprehensive presentation that told the complete story of his financial abuse and planned fraud. "Your Honor," she said to the mediator, "my client discovered that her husband was planning to defraud her of her inheritance through systematic manipulation and lies. Everything she did was in legitimate self-defense against economic abuse." She presented the printed emails between him and Rachel. bank records showing how I had paid for everything including his business trip with his mistress, and documentation of his attempts to pressure me into signing over my inheritance. The mediator, a woman in her 60s who had probably seen every kind of divorce nastiness, looked increasingly stern as she reviewed the evidence. "Mr. Davis," she said finally, "these emails show clear premeditation to commit fraud. You were planning to manipulate your wife into signing over her inheritance and then leave her with nothing. Is that accurate?" His lawyer whispered something to him, but he insisted on answering. "That's not how it was. Those emails are taken out of context. I was just frustrated with our financial situation." "You were frustrated enough to plan to steal your wife's house and spend months lying to her about an affair." "It wasn't. We weren't happy, the marriage wasn't working." "Then you should have filed for divorce honestly, not attempted to commit fraud." The mediation ended with the mediator recommending that he accept the divorce terms as proposed. He would get nothing from the house sale, but I would take responsibility for the credit card debt he had accumulated, a trade I was willing to make to end this quickly. But he wasn't willing to accept those terms. His lawyer filed motions challenging everything, claiming I had hidden assets and acted in bad faith. It was clear that he was going to drag this out as long as possible, probably hoping I would get tired of the legal fees and agree to give him money just to make it stop. He had no idea how determined I had become. Over the next 2 months, I spent countless hours with Patricia preparing for depositions and court hearings. The process was exhausting and expensive, but I had advantages he didn't. I had the truth on my side, I had documented evidence of everything, and I had the financial resources from the house sale to pay for good legal representation. More importantly, I had found my purpose. The Women's Financial Empowerment Program had offered me a full-time position as a counselor and educator. Every day, I worked with women who were going through situations similar to what I had experienced. Helping them gave me strength to fight my own battle. During one particularly difficult deposition, where his lawyer tried to paint me as an unstable woman who had destroyed her marriage over misunderstandings, I thought about all the women I was working with. Women who had been told they were crazy for questioning their husbands' financial decisions. Women who had been convinced they were incompetent with money while their partners stole from them. I was not unstable, I said clearly for the record. I was a woman who discovered that her husband was planning to commit fraud, and I took legal action to protect myself. The breakthrough came during his deposition. Under oath, he had to answer questions about the emails, about Rachel, about his plans for the house. His lawyer had probably advised him to be careful, but his arrogance got the better of him. "Yes, I thought about what would happen to the house if we divorced," he admitted. Any reasonable person would consider the financial implications of marriage. "And did you discuss these financial implications with your wife?" "She wouldn't have understood, she gets emotional about money." "But you discussed them with Rachel Johnson." "Rachel understands business. She's more practical. More practical than your wife about your wife's own inheritance." He realized his mistake too late. His own words had confirmed everything we had alleged, that he saw me as incompetent and Rachel as his real partner in planning our financial future. After that deposition, his lawyer recommended that he settle. The final agreement was everything Patricia and I had originally proposed. I kept all proceeds from the house sale, I took responsibility for the credit card debt, and we split our minimal joint assets. He got nothing except his freedom to be with Rachel. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in October, exactly 6 months after I had overheard that phone call. I wore my grandmother's necklace to court and felt her strength with me as the judge signed the papers. "Congratulations," Patricia said as we left the courthouse. "You did something very difficult, and you did it with grace and intelligence. I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. You had already saved yourself before you ever called me. I just helped with the paperwork." That evening, I celebrated quietly in my apartment. I had spent nearly $30,000 in legal fees, but I had protected over $1 million in assets, and more importantly, I had protected my future from someone who had planned to destroy it. I never heard from him again after the divorce was final. I heard through mutual friends that he and Rachel had broken up within a month of the settlement. Apparently, she lost interest once it became clear there would be no windfall from his marriage. He had lost his wife, his girlfriend, his home, and his meal ticket, all because he had underestimated the woman he had called a burden. The legal battle was over, but the real victory was just beginning. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I was living a life I couldn't have imagined when I was married. My work at the Women's Financial Empowerment Center had become my passion, and I was helping dozens of women recognize and escape financial abuse. Every Tuesday evening, I led a support group for women who were dealing with economic manipulation. The stories I heard were heartbreakingly familiar: husbands who controlled all the bank accounts, partners who ran up secret debt, men who convinced their wives they were too stupid to understand money while systematically stealing from them. The first step, I would tell the group, is recognizing that financial abuse is real abuse. It's not about being bad with money or making poor decisions. It's about someone deliberately undermining your financial independence to control you. One woman, Janet, had been married for 15 years to a man who gave her a weekly allowance from her own paycheck while he spent freely on himself. Another, Carmen, discovered that her husband had taken out credit cards in her name and run up $50,000 in debt without her knowledge. "How did you find the courage to leave?" Janet asked me during one session. "I realized that staying was scarier than leaving," I told her. "I was more afraid of losing myself completely than I was of starting over." My own story had become a teaching tool. When I told women about overhearing my ex-husband's phone call, about discovering his plans to steal my inheritance, about the systematic way he had undermined my confidence, they saw their own experiences reflected back at them. But more importantly, when I told them about how I had fought back, how I had gathered evidence, protected my assets, and rebuilt my life, they began to believe they could do the same thing. The center offered me a promotion to program director, which meant I would be developing new curricula and training other counselors. It was work that felt meaningful in a way my old job never had. Every woman who learned to protect herself financially was a victory against the men who thought they could control and manipulate their partners. I also began speaking at conferences and workshops about financial abuse awareness. The first time I stood in front of an audience of 200 women and told my story, I was terrified. But when I finished, the standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, and dozens of women came up afterward to thank me for giving them the courage to examine their own relationships. "I thought I was the only one woman told me. "I thought I was just bad with money and lucky that my husband took care of everything for me." "You're not bad with money," I assured her. "You're being manipulated by someone who wants you to think you're incompetent." My personal life was healing too. I had started dating again, but carefully and on my own terms. I met Tom at a financial literacy workshop where he was volunteering as a tax preparation instructor. He was a divorced father of two who worked as an accountant and spent his free time helping people understand their taxes. What I liked about Tom was that he never tried to take care of my finances or give me unsolicited advice about money. He respected my expertise and often asked for my opinion on difficult cases he was working on. After years of being told I didn't understand money, it was refreshing to be with someone who valued my knowledge. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," he told me after we had been dating for 3 months. "You're so confident and sure of yourself." I laughed. "Trust me, that's a recent development." When I told him about my marriage and divorce, he was amazed. "You sold the house and moved out while he was cheating on you with his girlfriend." "That's incredible." "It was terrifying," I admitted, "but it was also the most empowering thing I've ever done." 1 year after my divorce, I did something I had been planning for months. I bought a house. Not a big house like my grandmother's, but a perfect little 2-bedroom cottage with a garden and a front porch. It was mine, completely and totally mine, and no one could ever take it away from me. The night I got the keys, I sat on the front porch and called Lisa. "I did it," I told her. "I bought a house." "How does it feel?" "Like coming home to myself." 2 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected piece of news. My ex-husband had been arrested for fraud. Apparently, his pattern of financial manipulation hadn't ended with our marriage. He had convinced another woman to give him access to her accounts and had stolen over $200,000 from her. Patricia called to tell me about it. The prosecutor wants to know if you'd be willing to testify about your experience with him. It could help establish a pattern of behavior. Absolutely, I said without hesitation. At his sentencing hearing, I sat in the witness box and told the court about how he had planned to steal my inheritance, how he had systematically undermined my confidence, and how he had used emotional manipulation to commit financial fraud. The defendant is skilled at identifying vulnerable women and exploiting their trust, I testified. He presents himself as loving and supportive while systematically destroying his victims' financial independence and self-confidence. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. As they led him away, he looked at me one last time. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, just defeat. He finally understood that the burden he had tried to destroy had become the person who ensured he faced justice. After the hearing, the woman he had most recently victimized approached me. "Thank you," she said. "If you hadn't come forward, I might never have understood what really happened to me." "That's exactly why I did it," I told her. That evening, I went home to my little house and sat in my garden, thinking about how far I had traveled from that day when I overheard his phone call. I had gone from victim to survivor to advocate. I had turned my pain into purpose and my experience into expertise. The woman he had called a burden had become a force for justice and healing, and that felt like the sweetest revenge of all. 3 years after my divorce, I thought I was done with my ex-husband forever. He was in prison, I had rebuilt my life, and I rarely thought about the man who had tried to destroy me. But life had one more surprise in store. I was at the courthouse for a different case, testifying as an expert witness in another financial abuse case, when I saw a familiar figure in the hallway. My ex-husband was there for his parole hearing, accompanied by his lawyer and a woman I didn't recognize. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. 3 years in prison had changed him. He looked older, thinner, more worn down. But what struck me most was that he looked smaller somehow, as if the arrogance and confidence that had once defined him had been stripped away. His lawyer was talking to him, probably preparing him for the hearing, but he wasn't listening. He was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not anger, not hatred, but something closer to recognition. During the break in my case, I found myself face to face with him in the courthouse cafeteria. The woman he had been with was nowhere to be seen, and his lawyer was busy with paperwork. For the first time in years, we were alone together. "Emma," he said quietly. "Hello," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I heard about what you're doing now, the work with women's groups, the speaking engagements." I was surprised he knew about my career, but I shouldn't have been. My work fighting financial abuse had gained some attention in recent years. "Yes," I said simply. "I wanted to say." He paused, struggling with words in a way I had never seen before. "I wanted to say that I'm glad you won. Not glad that I lost, but glad that you won." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But what I saw was something I had never seen from him before: genuine remorse. "In prison, I had a lot of time to think about what I did," he continued. "Not just to you, but to the others. I kept telling myself that I was just trying to get ahead, that everyone does things they're not proud of. But that wasn't true, was it?" "No," I said, "it wasn't." "You were never a burden," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. "You were the best thing in my life, and I was too stupid and selfish to see it. I destroyed something good because I thought I deserved more than I had earned." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old Emma, the woman who would have wanted to comfort him and tell him it was okay. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger and wiser. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully, "but I need you to understand something. What you did to me wasn't just a mistake or a lapse in judgment. It was systematic abuse designed to steal my inheritance and destroy my independence. You planned it for months with your girlfriend, and you only stopped because I was smart enough to figure it out." He nodded slowly. "I know. I know that now. I've been in therapy trying to understand how I became someone who could do those things. And what did you learn? That I was raised to think I was entitled to whatever I wanted, regardless of who got hurt. That I saw other people as resources to be used rather than humans to be respected. That I'm a narcissist who convinced himself that his wants justified any behavior. It was the most honest self-assessment I had ever heard from him. But it was also 3 years too late. I'm not telling you this because I want forgiveness, he said quickly. I know I don't deserve that. I'm telling you because I want you to know that the work you're doing matters. Every time I hear about another woman learning to protect herself from someone like me, I think about how you saved yourself and how you're helping others do the same thing. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. The woman I was with today, he said, that's my sister. She's the only family member who still talks to me. She told me what you said at my sentencing about how I target vulnerable women. She was right to be proud of you for speaking up. I looked at him for a long moment, this man who had once controlled my life and nearly destroyed my future. He seemed genuinely changed, genuinely remorseful. But I also knew that remorse didn't undo the damage he had caused. I hope you're serious about changing, I said finally. I hope you use the rest of your life to make amends for the harm you've caused. But I also need you to understand that we will never have a relationship again. What you did to me was unforgivable, not because I'm holding a grudge, but because some actions have permanent consequences. I understand, he said. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm proud of who you became after you left me. His parole hearing was called and he stood to go. At the doorway he turned back one more time. For what it's worth, he said, you were never a burden. You were the strongest person I ever knew, and I was too threatened by that strength to appreciate it. Then he was gone, walking toward a hearing that would determine whether he would be released early for good behavior. I sat in the cafeteria for a few more minutes, processing the conversation. Part of me felt satisfied that he had finally acknowledged what he had done. Part of me felt sad for the man he could have been if he had made different choices. But mostly, I felt grateful that I had become someone who didn't need his apology to feel whole. Later that day, I learned that his parole had been denied. He would serve his full sentence. I felt no joy at this news, but I also felt no sympathy. Justice was running its course, and that was enough. That evening, I went home to my little house and called Tom, who had become such an important part of my new life. How did it feel to see him again? He asked. Like looking at a stranger, I said honestly. The man who hurt me was arrogant and cruel and completely convinced of his own superiority. The man I met today was broken and remorseful, and seemed to genuinely understand what he had done wrong. Do you think he's really changed? Maybe, but it doesn't matter to me either way. My healing isn't dependent on his redemption. That's what I love about you, Tom said. You don't need anyone else to validate your worth or your choices. That night I sat in my garden and thought about the journey that had brought me to this point. From the devastated woman who had overheard that terrible phone call to the confident advocate who had just faced down her abuser without flinching, I had traveled further than I could have imagined. The final confrontation hadn't been dramatic or explosive. It had been quiet and sad and ultimately healing. Not because he had apologized, but because I had faced him as an equal and realized that he no longer had any power over me. The burden had become the victor, and that victory was complete. 5 years after I overheard that life-changing phone call, I stood in front of an audience of 500 women at the National Conference on Economic Empowerment. As the keynote speaker, I was about to tell my story to the largest group I had ever addressed. 5 years ago, I began, my husband called me a burden. He thought I was naive, pathetic, and too stupid to understand what he was doing to me. He was planning to steal my inheritance and leave me with nothing. Today, I'm here to tell you that the woman he called a burden built a life beyond his wildest imagination. The applause was immediate and thunderous. In the audience, I could see women of all ages, all backgrounds, all united by the shared experience of financial manipulation and the shared determination to fight back. I told them about the phone call, about discovering the emails, about the terrifying decision to sell my house and start over. I told them about the legal battles, the moments of doubt, and the gradual process of rebuilding my confidence in my life. The most important thing I learned, I said, is that financial abuse is not about money. It's about power and control. When someone convinces you that you're incompetent with finances, they're not protecting you, they're protecting their ability to manipulate you. After my speech, I was surrounded by women who wanted to share their own stories. A young mother whose husband had convinced her to quit her job and then used her financial dependence to control every aspect of her life. An older woman whose partner had slowly taken over all her accounts until she had no access to her own money. A college student whose boyfriend was pressuring her to take out loans for his business ventures. Each story was different, but the pattern was always the same: isolation, manipulation, and the gradual erosion of financial independence designed to make women dependent and compliant. "How did you find the courage to fight back?" the young mother asked me. I realized that the life he was planning for me was worse than the uncertainty of starting over, I told her. And I discovered that I was stronger than he had convinced me I was. My work had expanded far beyond support groups and counseling. I had written a book about financial abuse that had become a bestseller. I consulted with law enforcement agencies about recognizing economic crimes. I had testified before Congress about the need for stronger protections for victims of financial manipulation. But the work I was most proud of was the scholarship program I had established with some of the money from my house sale. The Emma Davis Foundation provided financial assistance and legal support for women escaping economically abusive relationships. In 5 years, we had helped over 300 women rebuild their lives. Each scholarship recipient received not just money, but comprehensive support, legal assistance, financial counseling, career guidance, and emotional support. We helped them open their own bank accounts, understand their credit reports, and develop the skills they needed to maintain their independence. "You saved my life," one recipient told me at our annual gala. "Not just financially, but emotionally. You showed me that I wasn't crazy or incompetent. You showed me that I deserved better." Moments like that made every difficult day worth it. My personal life had flourished too. Tom and I had been married for 2 years in a ceremony that was everything my first wedding hadn't been: honest, joyful, and based on genuine love and respect. He supported my work completely and often volunteered with the foundation. "I love watching you speak," he told me after one particularly powerful presentation. "You light up when you're helping people understand their worth." We had bought a larger house together, one with enough space for his 2 children when they visited, and a home office where I could work on my writing and advocacy. It was a true partnership, built on mutual respect and shared values. I also reconnected with parts of my family I had lost touch with during my abusive marriage. My cousin Sarah, who lived across the country, flew in for my remarriage and told me how worried the family had been about me during my first marriage. "You seemed to disappear," she said. "You stopped calling, stopped coming to family events. We could tell something was wrong, but we didn't know how to help." "He isolated me gradually," I explained, "so gradually that I didn't realize it was happening." That's part of how financial abuse works. They cut you off from your support system so you have nowhere to turn when you finally realize what's happening. The most meaningful moment of my new life came 3 years after my remarriage. I was speaking at a small workshop for recently divorced women when a young woman in her 20s approached me afterward. "Mrs. Davis," she said, "I need to tell you something. My mom attended one of your talks 2 years ago. She had been married to my stepdad for 10 years, and he controlled everything: her paycheck, her car, even her cell phone plan. After hearing you speak, she realized she was being abused." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. She left him 6 months later. It was hard at first, but now she has her own apartment, her own job, and her own bank account. She's happier than I've seen her in years. She always says that you saved her life. "Your mother saved her own life," I told her. "I just helped her realize she had the power to do it." "She wanted me to give you this," the young woman said, handing me a handwritten note. The note was simple: "Thank you for showing me that I was never the problem. Thank you for helping me find my strength. Because of you, my daughter will never accept being treated the way I was." You didn't just save me, you saved the next generation. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by letters and emails from women whose lives had been changed by the work we were doing. Each story was a reminder that my own painful experience had been transformed into something meaningful and powerful. I thought about my grandmother, whose inheritance had been the catalyst for my ex-husband's betrayal and my own awakening. I wished she could see what her house had ultimately made possible, not just my own freedom, but the freedom of hundreds of other women. I thought about the scared, confused woman I had been 5 years ago, standing in her kitchen and listening to her husband plot against her. That woman had felt powerless and alone. She had believed she was a burden. The woman I had become was powerful, surrounded by love and support, and dedicated to ensuring that no other woman would have to endure what I had experienced alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Dinner's ready when you are, I made your favorite." I smiled and closed my laptop. The work would be there tomorrow. There were always more women to help, more stories to share, more battles to fight against financial abuse. But tonight, I would enjoy the simple pleasure of coming home to a man who loved and respected me, who celebrated my success instead of undermining it, who saw my strength as something to admire rather than something to destroy. The burden had become a beacon. The victim had become a victor. And the woman who had been called pathetic and naive had built a legacy that would protect and empower others for years to come. As I walked toward the kitchen, where my husband was waiting with dinner and a smile, I reflected on the most important lesson of my journey. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the best life you could ever imagine. The revenge I had taken on my ex-husband by selling the house had been swift and satisfying. But the life I had built afterward was the real victory, not just over him, but over every person who had ever tried to convince a woman that she was less capable, less intelligent, or less worthy than she truly was. I was living proof that they were wrong, and I would spend the rest of my life making sure other women knew it too.